they have to show in their narrative what type of best management practices they will be utilizing, the resources that will prevent or reduce the discharge of pollutants and control fugitive dust. And I included the definition of the best management practices if you needed a refresher on that. But we're trying to utilize those practices more now. They haven't been for the special use permit applications, but they have for other applications, but we've been pretty lenient. Okay. So then the next recommendation is under the analysis section. We're just asking that if we require additional information, that the applicant pay for that additional analysis that they may need to provide. And that's in item 5 there. Any questions on those? Okay. Okay, so for special use permits, they have to place signs on the property. So what we're doing here is we're just clarifying where they need to be located and also that they need to be maintained. So we're saying that they need to be posted on or near the property lines and then maintained by the applicant for the 21-day period. I think that one's straightforward. And then for the decisional criteria, just a slight clarification that they need to provide a site plan, and the supporting documentation will also be a part of the review process. And then further, we may require additional information, and that the burden of proof shall rest solely on the applicant, and they shall clearly demonstrate how the SUP shall meet the following decisional criteria. So the applicant has a little more responsibility with their application. And so with the decisional criteria, we're expanding on what an applicant needs to submit. So for one, for traffic flows and impact, they need to show that there's adequate measures to accommodate the ingress and egress to avoid congestion, and how it will impede traffic flows, or it will not create a hazardous or unsafe condition. So they need to address that in their narrative. And then they also need to show that there should be sufficient off-street parking and loading facilities that has to comply with the UDC. And then they also need to show the public need for the activity and how it complies with the comp plan. That hasn't been addressed. The comp plan has been addressed just for zone changes. So we're adding it here to the special use permits. And then for the water and sewer needs, they need to show that there is infrastructure available. To support the use. And then they need to show the extent of the existing capacity for the infrastructure and the public facilities and services that are available to meet the demand generated by the proposed use. And then number 5, for environmentally sensitive areas, they need to show how the SUP will mitigate if there is an environmentally sensitive area in the vicinity or if it's of historical significance. And then the impact for the SUP, we're adding that it should provide a positive, they have to show that it provides a positive impact on adjacent properties and it is not detrimental to the public health, safety, and general welfare of the residents within the vicinity. And these are all just clarifications. And then finally, the implementation of the best management practices. And they shall demonstrate that they shall submit a schedule of activities, show maintenance procedures or other management practices, and site development work that would optimize the resources to be used to prevent or reduce the discharge of pollutants to the MS4 and waters of the U.S. Any questions on the application process?
So you mean if somebody want to put a cannabis dispensary in a residential area, they can really positively prove it that they have a positive impact on the neighborhood?
Well, they have to show that it's not a negative impact. They just need to address it by traffic flows, by the items that are
Because he says he has to provide a positive impact on adjacent property. They can really prove that? I mean, to me, that,
Well, they could state that it generates jobs, or, they just need to submit some information. Does that answer your question?
well, he answers my question. He doesn't take care of my concerns, but
Yeah.
to me,
Well, it starts the conversation, though.
Yeah, I think, Mo, that it's pretty subjective. In some areas, it might be appropriate if there's other commercial uses in the area, restaurants and other things. But I think where we've had some conflict is in areas where there is no commercial activity at all. And then you end up with a producer that's, in very close proximity to residential homes. And so I think, one of the reasons that we're making these amendments is not strictly for cannabis uses, but because it's not supposed to be an automatic approval. They need to be able to demonstrate that it is an appropriate use there and that it's going to provide some kind of benefit. And you might argue that a cannabis dispensary never provides a benefit, but there may be situations where it is appropriate. And so we're trying to be more discerning about the special use permits and what criteria we use to determine if they're appropriate or not.
It is a
I
hard
mean,
one.
to me, as long as we hold them to that, I don't have an issue with it. But really, the problem is, if you're gonna waive from it because they're gonna appeal it, then, because personally, if you're saying you're gonna provide a positive impact, I wanna see it. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's a disease engineers have, I don't know. I mean, to me, but I wanna make sure when you're saying positively you want to impact the drainage, I want to see it. Or positively impact the traffic. And now you're saying to positively impact the properties, all residential. I'm looking at my own where I live and I go, I don't know, my neighbors might be there all the time, I don't know.
Do you think we can rephrase it differently or reword it, or?
No, as long as we hold them to it, I don't have
Okay.
an issue. I just want to make sure that commissioners are going to approve these things, that they understand. Don't come back to us because you're being hard on the people. They're saying, that's not proof that you're positively impacting a neighborhood. You're not going to approve it, and then they go appeal it to higher up. So.
You would almost need an opposing argument from someone that says that it's negative to provide the no, it's not argument. But I mean, if I guess the term, the burden of proof is on the applicant. If nobody opposes it, then
Yeah,
who's going to
exactly.
say that they're incorrect?
That's it. As long as they prove it, they need to provide the proof. Don't say, well, tell me exactly what Mike said. Thank you. Say, well, how's it negatively impacts? No, you tell me how it's positively impacting.
Right. Okay. Anything on that one, Dan? Okay.
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you. So then, under Section E, under approval procedures and conditions, we're adding a simple statement that says that the SUP shall not be considered as establishing a binding precedent to grant other special use permits. So we're stating that each special use permit is reviewed on a case-by-case basis and shouldn't establish any precedent. Okay. Then finally, under recording of the SUPs, we're just adding the word conditions. So when we record the SUP, we need to state what the provisions and conditions of the SUP are in the order that we file and record. Okay, anything on the special use permits before we go to cannabis? All righty, and I'm going to turn this over to Albert, since he's the cannabis guru in our department, if you will.
Good morning, members of the DRC. So on page 7 of 12 there, we have the introduction to the land use matrix. So we have, the P's are for permitted uses, C's are for conditional uses, S are special use permits, and A is that category for those properties that are assessed as agriculture. So, and basically the A means that if, that the use that has that A designation is permitted if the property is assessed as ag for on-farm operations only. An SUP is required if it doesn't have that ag assessment. But so what we're saying here is that for any property that's assessed as ag, and an applicant's coming in for a cannabis microbusiness, cannabis microbusiness producer, or cannabis producer, a public hearing and SUP is going to be required if it's located within a recorded subdivision where the lot sizes are 1 acre or less. So, if it's a D1L, if it's a D2, if somebody comes in and has that ag assessment already, but they're like on half-acre lots, they're going to have to go through that special use permitting process. That's one of the changes that we're including in here. The way it is right now on the books, it really doesn't matter. As long as you have that ag assessment, it doesn't matter if you're in a recorded subdivision or not. It's allowed by right. So we're including that that change in our code for now.
What's a micro business?
So micro business producer, well, let me go down the list. A cannabis micro business, you're basically allowed to do a number of items, but you're limited to 200 plants. But with the micro business, you can do some manufacturing, deliveries, packaging, that kind of stuff. It's an integrated or vertical license where the state allows you to do 5 different types of uses, and you can do any one of those uses. But you're capped at on our code, you're capped at 200 plants max.
So the fact that the micro business is in the agriculture allowance or whatever, it doesn't imply that you can have those number of plants inside of a residence. You have to have an agricultural type of building.
Yeah, no, that's correct. Yeah, we've done a few where they've converted like garages or accessory structures, but they've all had, they all have to meet the code, the building code.
So like if you had a very large residential home that had an attached garage and they converted that garage to a like plant storage or whatever, you could do that. Or if
Potentially, yes, potentially, but you would have to meet the building code. I mean, there's just off the top of my head, probably firewalls and that kind of stuff would have to be implemented, and they're to separate the residential use from the growing facility. A micro business producer. So we ended up creating this category because we understood that there were people that just wanted to grow. They weren't really interested in manufacturing and retail, that kind of stuff. They just wanted to grow their 200 plants. That's what a micro business producer is. But once again, they're only capped at 200 plants. A cannabis producer, it's basically whatever the state allows them to whatever the state gives them for the number of plants. It used to be, man, I can't even think because it changes, constantly. But I know the number of plants now is pretty high. So that's what the difference is between just a cannabis micro business, a micro business producer, and a cannabis producer.
Thanks.
So some of the changes that we did on here, just moving forward here with the land use matrix, for a cannabis micro business producer, we had a little typo there under C1 and C2, where it says that they're only allowed if they're assessed as ag, but it should be a P. It should be permitted. That's what was the original proposal. It just never transferred over into our code. So we're just correcting that issue. And it's same for the cannabis producer. So basically, I mean, if you can have a commercial greenhouse in C1 and C2, you should be able to grow cannabis as well. That's what the The idea was before, it just never transferred over when we made that change. And we have, greenhouse and nursery, commercial, so they're both allowed under those two zoning designations. So we're just making sure that it mirrors that. These are not really associated with cannabis, but we'll be talking about them later. But we really didn't have a definition for medium manufacturing. So we're adding that in there, and we'll be talking about that later. We have light manufacturing, we have heavy manufacturing, but we don't have medium manufacturing. So we've added that in there. And then, of course, we'll be talking about the community solar facilities and renewable energy facilities right after cannabis. We're making a correction to some of the language included in the 35502G. Number 7, the way it was written before, basically said that if you had a business and you were in a T4 zone, then you really didn't need anything to proceed with the retail establishment for cannabis. We're clarifying that. Now we're saying if an established retail business legally exists in a T4 zone and has an existing county business registration, at the time the ordinance was adopted, then a cannabis retailer may be permitted without the application of an SUP. The way it was basically if you had a T4, if you were in a T4 zone, then you were able to do it without anything. So we're clarifying that you needed to have a legal business and a business registration in order to have your cannabis retail business in T4. So we're just clarifying that section.
Albert, so that means that a previous business had to be there for a cannabis business to open?
Yes. So if retail business, let me go back and check how it was written. We're just clarifying and making sure that they were legal, that they had a county business registration on there, on that T4 zone.
An existing retail.
An existing retail business. So we're just clarifying that. Before it was just any kind of business. Any I mean, if it was like a barber shop or mechanic shop or whatever, that was there, that was grandfathered in. The way it's written right now, they can, start a cannabis shop if they wanted to. But right now we're making sure that it has to be retail and it has to be, legal, with the current business registration. So everything up to date.
Yeah, just so I understand. So that if it's zone T4 and they want to build a new building, it doesn't fall under this?
No, they would have to meet the
other
requirements,
criteria.
because it's a new one. This is for existing businesses right now in the T4 zone.
Okay.
And then furthermore, so right now, number 10, we're just clarifying, what we talked about right now when we were looking at the matrix. Making sure that if you're in a recorded subdivision, if you're assessed as ag, but the lot sizes are, less than 1 acre, then you're going to have to go through that special use permit process and public hearing. Number 11 is something new that we've added in there. We're basically calling out for some landscaping and buffering for these production facilities. What we're basically saying is that you need to have a buffer area that's at least 12 feet wide. There has to be a fence or a solid wall at least 6 foot tall. So if you can envision, a square property, from your property line in, you're going to have 12 feet of, some buffering and some landscaping. At 12 feet from your property line, that's where your fence and wall is supposed to be located. There's no point in having a wall at your property line and then all the landscaping right behind it. So we want the landscaping and buffering first, then you have your rock wall, and then you have your growing facility. We're adding so we're adding that 12-foot buffer with the 6-foot wall, 12 feet from the property line, and then we're also giving a description of what kind of landscaping, which is basically to provide an intermittent visual obstruction with a minimum of 6 feet in height and a minimum of 50% visual obstruction along the buffer length. And I think that basically is the same description as what we have in for a buffer type 1 already in our landscaping section of our code. For number 12, we're saying that the use of barbed wire or razor fencing is not permitted if the facility is going to be next to a residential zoning district or residential use. Number 13, it's something that we're also adding. You know, we've had a lot of requests for providing a drive-up service window to some of the retail facilities. So we're just adding requirements for parking and for stacking lanes, because we don't. I mean, they're kind of addressed in our code right now for restaurants, but not specifically for cannabis retail. So we've also included that just to have some requirements for whenever somebody wants to apply for to have a driveway window on their retail establishment. We're also stating that it has to be a fixed, permanent, and a non-portable building. So if you're going to do a drive-up window on your establishment, it has to be a building. It can't just be something that you can move around within your property like a shack, or something you can buy off of Home Depot or a Mueller building that's not going to be anchored down to the property. So we're making sure that that's included in our changes, that it has to be a standalone structure and it has to be fixed and permanent on the property.
Albert, are there any square footage requirements, minimum, that if they had a tiny little standalone structure that was enough for one person? I don't remember if there's any minimum.
It's going to be, well, that last little sentence right there, it just says meets the requirement of the building and fire code. So, whatever minimum standards are in there, that's what they're going to have to meet.
Okay.
I know what comes to mind is the one that's there on Valley next to Calichi's, which is just a little,
Yeah.
a little building. But it's going to have to meet the requirements of the building code for minimum square footage. And then on this next section, I'll turn it again over to Janine. Do you have any questions on cannabis?
And then due to the passage of the Community Solar Act, we've been getting a lot of application for community solar facilities, and we really didn't have any regulations. So now what we're proposing is to establish some regulations. And we used the county of Santa Fe as a model. So we're requesting that they submit a detailed site plan that complies with the requirements of our ordinance per section 2.8. We're also stating that buffering and landscaping would not be required for these community solar facilities. And if they do provide fencing around the perimeter, we're requesting that they use agricultural fencing 6 to 8 feet in height with 6-inch knots that will help protect the wildlife. And then for the external access roads and driveways, they can go down to 20 feet, providing there's adequate drainage control, and that the surface is hard packed with a compaction of 95% of the maximum density. And that if the access road adjoins a paved road, they shall asphalt or have a concrete apron to protect the pavement. Okay. And then we're also requiring a SWIP and a grading and drainage plan prior to the issuance of a construction or building permit. And then we're also asking that they submit state approval for the location of this facility. And they'll do that at the construction and building permit stage as well. And then we're also requiring that if they disturb the area, that they reseed it with drought-tolerant native plant species, and that the weed and plant materials shall be properly managed to reduce fire risks. And then we're asking for a remediation and decommissioning plan. And then it shall consist of several items. The first being that they shall decommission the facility no later than 12 months after the end of the useful life of the facility. And that they shall remove all solar panels, structures, cabling, electrical components, roads and foundations to a depth of 36 inches, and properly dispose and recycle the equipment. And then also the disturbed area shall also be graded and reseeded with the drought-tolerant species. And they also shall retain a New Mexico professional engineer to estimate the cost of the decommissioning plan without taking into consideration the salvage value of the equipment. Okay, there it is again. And that the estimate shall be submitted to the county and approved by the county after the first year of operation and then every 5th year thereafter. And then finally, the owner-operator shall provide assurances that they have the financial resources available to fully decommission the site, and that they should either post a bond, a letter of credit, or other financial guarantee to ensure the proper decommissioning of the site. And these are the items that we've been requiring from the commission. It's been a departmental policy, but not an ordinance.
Janine, I have a discussion topic,
Uh-huh.
I guess, as far as H4 being an approved SWIP and grading and drainage plan. It seems like an ideal space for a solar panel facility is often in the floodplain because it's not otherwise able to be developed for anything else. So an approved grading and drainage plan, I think, is important, and I think what you have in there is good, but I think there needs to be more criteria in 35605 for specifically what needs to be included on the grading and drainage plan for community solar facilities. Because so what happens is we issue a floodplain development permit that basically says we're okay with them developing the floodplain. Fine, but that also implies that we're allowing, any clearing and grubbing and any over excavation to put the foundations in there, and so it starts to balloon very quickly. But typically what we have been getting is a site plan, for example, and I've had this argument with several different developers on whether or not a solar panel constitutes impervious area. So it brings in the whole ponding scenario, or what size pond, or what kind of drainage conveyance is required for all this stuff. I don't really have an answer. I guess, Mo, I'm interested in what your thoughts are, but for example, solar panels can be vertical, or I guess flat, parallel to the ground, in which case I could make an argument that it is 100% impervious area. They're only a couple inches apart. But for the most part, they're typically at like a 30, 45 degree angle, to the point where they have argued before that, it's gonna, rainfall is gonna sheet flow off the top of it, and all there's, empty ground underneath it, and it's just a pole. And if it's on flat land, I typically would make a concession, like, okay, I get it. It's, not making them put as much ponding. But say they're in a floodplain or something where it's on a slope topography, 1%, 2%, all that water is still not soaking into the ground directly underneath the panel, and it's going down slope. And so it's weird, and there's not really a formula or a path that I know of to do it, but I think it's something that I've been asked at least 5 or 6 times. And what also goes into it is the scale of the solar facility. So for example, I think I was up here for DRC or P&Z a couple weeks ago. That one was, I don't remember what the size was, but the impact to the lot itself for that size of solar array would be different than, I think we had a pre-app on it last week or whatever for 1,100 acres of solar panels. That's a lot of impact, down there in that area. There's not really that much infrastructure being impacted by it, but knowing that this is going to be a thing, it could vary in terms of impact depending on where it's going to be. So I guess I'm just looking for feedback. I think this should be in there as is, but we may want to think about making additions to 605, and then obviously the floodplain part in 350, 604, with some guidance for engineers on how to produce something that's actually useful for us.
Well, perhaps as a quick fix, we can add a phrase. Let me go back here. Under 4, if the property is located within a floodplain, special requirements may be required by the Flood Commission, or?
Yeah, and I guess that's what's been happening, is because we put that floodplain development permit in there to get people to start the conversation with us, because like I said, depending on size of the array, type of flood zone, type of topography, it's all different. But what I'm, I guess, kind of frustrated with is having individual meetings with every single person, not giving them the same information. Because at some point, it's going to be like, well, I did this project here, and you made me do this. Now I'm doing this, and it's different. Why? And I don't really have a good answer for it. So I was trying to standardize a little bit to whatever extent possible, but I don't have any suggestions right now, but something that I think would be helpful to think about. And I guess until then, adding that language would be good to, until then, yeah, you're gonna have to have site-specific individual meetings with the Flood Commission to figure out what's relevant for the time being, but I don't know if City of Santa Fe or any other municipalities have gone so far as to update their design standards for solar panels, but it seems like a lot of it's zoning related and.
Yes, and it's real general too.
Yeah. And I guess, for example, some of the things that I've been requiring is, since they're stamped by an engineer most often, if they're in a floodplain and they want to put things in the flood zone, I have to have like a typical section that shows that the bottom of the panel is going to be at least, imagine that like a finished floor. Like if I know there's an X amount of flow going across the property, it can't be obstructing that depth of flow. Or, you have to prove to me that the foundation, if it's in the flood zone, that it's designed to withstand erosion and scour. Because if it's in a flood zone, you have the potential for scour around the foundation to end up taking out your solar panel and ending up downstream. Then it becomes junk or, all that stuff. But it depends, so.
So we can add a clause over 4, and I'm not sure about the exact wording. So if the property is located within a floodplain, consult with the Flood Commission for,
Yeah, I think that part's fair, the
Okay.
floodplain part. The other general part that may be easier is the site plan component, because at any rate, we do require ponding. How do you determine how much ponding is required for solar panel? That would require some level of determination from county engineer, from Flood Commission as to is it 100% impervious, or do we allow ponding credits for solar panels anywhere in between? What are we expecting? Because I guess when we get special use permits, they don't do any engineering right up front. They typically maximize the footprint based on the parcel, and they don't account for ponding. And so we have to tell them, oh, you need X amount of space for ponding. They're now losing panels. So they don't typically like to hear that. And then they get the argument of, there's no impervious. It's all just, they send me a picture and it's a, bunch of grass underneath it. And they're like, look, it's fine. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. You have any immediate thoughts or opinions?
I agree.
And I guess the cop-out for staff, I call it a cop-out because we don't have an answer at this time, but it's the burden of proof is on the applicant,
Right.
really. Because, I mean, you could convince me either way if you're good at it, but it's a matter of if you put something on there you don't want ponding, am I going to get yelled at by the person downstream that says you didn't require them to do this? I have to be able to say, here's why we didn't. So, whatever the burden of proof statement you put in the previous section, maybe that's an easy fix for now until Amendment 5 or whatever, if we have a better solution.
Okay. Any other further recommendations? So we'll go ahead and work on that statement and add it.
Yeah, let me know.
I think that's great. Yep. And then our final recommendation is just to add a section on renewable energy facilities. And then we're requiring that they follow the same guidelines and requirements as community solar facilities unless the energy source does not require any site infrastructure improvements or state permitting requirements. So that concludes amendment number 4. Oh, we do have some definitions. And the definition of Community Solar Act was taken directly from the legislature, which is from the 2021 Community Solar Act. So it's defined as a facility that generates and may store electricity by means of a solar voltaic device. Subscribers to the facility receive a bill credit for the electricity generated in proportion to the subscriber's share of the facility's kilowatt hour output. So this just distinguishes it from rooftop solar, basically. And then we're also adding one change to the special use permit definition, and we're adding the word intensity to the scale and intensity and nature of the use. So what we're requesting is a recommendation that we can take to the P&Z, and I will include item that Michael talked about. And the phrase will be something like, if the property is located within a floodplain, consultation with the flood commission is required. Okay. Any further input, recommendations? Okay. Alrighty. Thank you all.
Can I have a motion to recommend these amendments to the P&Z?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Is there any other staff input at this time? No, okay. I don't see any members of the public, so we will move on to number 6, adjournment. Thank you.
Is that what we can change our